At what point do we as a collective agree that this has just gone way too far?
I had warned members of council that I was aware of the potential ramifications of not passing this bylaw.
But the bylaw didn't pass. The vote was 3-2 against, with Emo Mayor Harold McQuaker in opposition.
There's no flag being flown for the other side of the coin. So that being said,
Sorry, Harold, what's the other side of the coin?
Well, the other side of the coin, there's no flags being flown for the straight people.
Well, this is what happens, I guess, when you're too egotistical and prideful and you do things that stomp on the rights and freedoms of others to virtue signal and be a victim all the time. We are going to be getting into this story, wild one, that came out of Emo, Ontario. But I did want to first say that in response to this, really, because the Emo, Ontario story is actually a couple weeks old already, but this just came out today. Barhead, a town in Alberta, has officially voted to ban pride, crosswalks, and rainbow flags from municipal property. Additionally, the town of Westlock implemented a very similar bylaw back in February. And the argument really is that governments should avoid promoting certain groups over others. I'm Jasmine Lane. You're watching Over Opinionated. And it's pretty hard to be opinionated sometimes because boy, oh boy, are there ever a lot of risks to sharing what you think. And this is one of them for sure. One of those topics that I avoid talking about because I'm very aware of the vitriol and attacks. I'm aware of how much it can absolutely destroy my credibility, how much I can be dragged through the mud as a result of this. But also, the truth is greater, I think, than being meek and abiding by things that don't add up to you and allowing people to stomp all over you, not because they want to create a better society, but because they are entitled and egotistical and they want to win. And that really appears to be exactly the case with this situation. If you are new to the channel, hello, be sure to subscribe. You can also comment your thoughts down below. Like the video as well. That helps YouTube show it to more people.
It's not a great look for a rural community that is struggling to build its economy, to grow its population, and to attract and retain young people. So I'm optimistic that they're going to see this in a different light now that we're at the other side of this decision.
Now, to be as transparent as humanly possible, I've been to plenty of Pride events. I was just at the one in West Hollywood earlier this summer. I've walked in the parades. I have hosted Pride events. I've hosted Pride stages that have gone up at said events. And I don't particularly care at all, really, what you do behind closed doors or who you love. I do care an awful lot, actually, when people start trying to force their ideology and their views down the throats of others. And they do it in a way where it's not to create a better society, because filing a complaint to fine somebody is not a good Samaritan way to create a better society. That is a way for you to signal that you have won. It comes from a very egotistical and prideful place, no pun intended.
We are not making this up. A Canadian town has been fined $10,000 for refusing to celebrate Pride Month. And the town's councillors who voted against Pride Month have been ordered to undergo human rights training by refusing to proclaim June as Pride Month. The town was also cited for failing to fly an LGBTQ2, the 2 stands for two-spirited, rainbow flag, despite the fact they didn't have an official flagpole.
So back in 2020, Borderland Pride asked the township of Emo, Ontario, which by the way only has a population of 1,300 people, to celebrate Pride Month by flying the Pride flag. And there was a vote in council about it. The council voted 3-2 and declined. In response to this, Borderlands Pride, instead of just, having their celebration without a flag at an official building, but you could put flags on your cars or your own houses or at a parade if you had one through the streets. They instead decided to take this to the Ontario Human Rights Commission, a decision that would cost taxpayers in the region tens of thousands of dollars, which is very interesting, by the way, because it's important to note that during this same time period, the township of Emo was struggling financially so much that they were even trying and accepting public donations in order to keep their public library open. Borderlands Pride did attempt to settle outside of court, saying that if Emo would agree to publish an apology and also give Borderlands compensation, which was a lesser amount than what was asked for initially, and also order diversity and inclusion training for its members and agreed to adopt Pride proclamations in the future without stripping out their 2S LGBTQIA plus affirming language. The township of Emo declined and decided to go through the tribunal process instead. Alan Stratton, who wrote for the National Post and is a part of this community, said, and I quote, "Ultimately, this is about the unilateral power of an unelected, unaccountable government agency to compel speech. Public officials must not be allowed to discriminate against us, but neither should they be forced to proactively support us. In the 21st century, we have full civil rights, including equal marriage and the ability to adopt. It is demeaning to our pride to run to the state when an idiot chooses to be an ass. In my view, Borderland Pride shamed LGBT and T communities by trivializing our historic struggles for equality. It also fed the growing and understandable backlash against us by finding in its favor the Ontario Human Rights Commission lost sight of its mission, broke public confidence in its legitimacy, and provided a counterproductive example of left-wing authoritarianism."
I've objected to it most of my life, to the whole Pride thing, and mainly on taste grounds, it has to be said. I don't begrudge anyone having a party. I do begrudge people mistaking their sexuality for some massively important signifier, which demands that other people then not just respect them, but pay them some special dues. And actually, in actual fact, you could see this. So I've stumbled across Pride a couple of times in my time. I've never gone, but I've stumbled across it a few times. And one of the things is, on a simple matter of aesthetics, a taste that I deeply dislike, is seeing a bunch of disco gays on top of a bus waving to the public as if they're celebrities. Sorry, love, you're not a celebrity, you're just gay. That's all. And you shouldn't treat the general public as your audience, waiting for them to celebrate the magnificent, wonderful you. So I think there's just this nasty narcissism at the heart of this. And I've got no time for it.
Can we also just realize the fact that deciding not to celebrate Pride Month is a perfectly legal, personal choice that can have many reasons behind it that are not all bigotry or hatred. And the fact that you can be canceled or shamed and have very real consequences simply because you do not want to raise a flag is just insane to me. And where does this end? You know, are they going to start going to mosques and asking them to raise the pride flag? Probably not. Man, that would be a really interesting court case to listen to if they did, though.
The real blame lies with the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal. It's almost a given now that any organisation that has human rights in the title won't be upholding human rights, they'll be violating them. And Caleb, that's exactly what they've done in this instance.
It's just obscene. I don't think I can even describe how obscene this decision is. Because if we're talking about human rights here, surely freedom is a fundamental human right as well. And so a council ought to have the freedom to decide what flags it wants to put up the flagpole that doesn't exist, by the way, and what months it chooses it's going to celebrate. And if it says, oh, well, we don't particularly think that in our town of 1,300 people, it's going to make too much of a difference if we celebrate Pride Month or not, who cares? I mean, this is what happens when the long arm of the law is allowed to tell us what we can and cannot say. I mean, this is veering into thought crime.
There are many very legitimate reasons why somebody may not want to virtue signal. They might actually just detest virtue signaling. Maybe they want to be neutral, and you can't be neutral if you pick a side. Maybe they are religious. Maybe it's part of their cultural belief. And why is it that, especially in terms of Christianity or Abrahamic faiths, that we are so cool with stomping all over them, but you would never, ever, ever do the same thing in other cultures and other religious backgrounds and demand that they support you in the same way? Why is it that none of these activists bat an eyelash when Nike changes their logo to be rainbow colored for the month of June in the West, but doesn't do it in Saudi Arabia or in Iran or Afghanistan or any of those places? Why are these activists so keen on attacking and digging their feet in the mud even deeper on this issue in a place where you have equal rights? You do. But they will never, ever say anything about other parts of the world where you absolutely don't, where people quite literally are being pushed off of buildings because of who they love. And let's also not forget that as a society, you shouldn't be a totalitarian, an authoritarian. You shouldn't be. That's wrong. That's immoral. That's evil right there. To think that every single human being has to agree with you, affirm you, and do exactly what you want them to do. That is such scary, entitled thinking, which really is one of the biggest problems with a lot of these movements, is it's gone so much further then we just want equality and we just want to blend in. And the story instead has turned into, we want to absolutely dominate you and we will use any power possible to ensure that you bend the knee to us. Nobody wants to live in a world like that. And that is why you have started to see a really big rejection to a lot of these movements that were once totally accepted. You've given these movements a really bad name because they once stood for something very legitimate and very real, and they have simply gone too far. Not participating in a Pride Month doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're a bigot, you're hateful. Oh, well, you're a phobe. That's not what that means. And people who support and don't support Pride Month or virtue signaling by a flag can absolutely coexist peacefully. You just have to mutually respect each other. And that seems to be the problem here, because obviously this activist group is not respecting the other party. They're saying, no, you're hateful and we're going to destroy you because you don't want to put up our flag. How silly is that? Like, honest, that's what we're fighting about right now? What?
If these groups, these boards, these human rights commissions are willing to hold a gun to your head and charge you money for not doing what activists tell you to do, it is insane.
And the group, this Borderland Pride group, their militance over this cannot be overstated. Check out this quote from Borderland Pride director Douglas Judson. He said, as a lawyer who does this work, that means I'm going to start taking people's houses and their vehicles and their toys and draining their bank accounts and garnishing their wages, because no one is going to stop behaving this way until there were real consequences. Oh, yeah, well, I can't understand why everyone wouldn't just be rolling over to keep you happy, mate. These guys, once they won the case, $15,000 in total, they said to this council, we'll donate a third of our award to the public library if you guys agree to host a drag queen story time at a date of our choosing. Now, the council, it would appear, has said no to this point. They're not desperate for a handout for the people who have effectively sued them using the commission. But how's this, them then being sent off to the commission's own retraining education camp for Human Rights 101? As someone who has a master's degree in human rights, I'd love to attend this course because, as Matt just said, it's not a human right that you must be celebrated for all your life choices, especially by people who haven't made those same life choices and just want to be left alone to live their own lives.
And let's summarize this by quickly refreshing your memory with, the Bill of Rights in Canada, the right to individual equality before the law and the protection of the law, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly and association, freedom of the press. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. And honestly, quickly, just a little anecdotal story, I suppose. This is all giving me vibes. I remember being in high school and there was this one kid that I grew up with, and he was such a dick. And I remember just before we graduated, he made national news because he had started some sort of an LGBTQ group somewhere. He actually flew down to Ottawa. He met Justin Trudeau. It was this whole big thing that he was the guy behind all of this. And I remember watching a CTV interview of him once when I was in my early 20s at this point, and he's still fighting this cause. And he said in this interview, I was bullied my whole life because I'm gay, and that's not okay. And I just remember so many people that knew him saying, dude, the reason why you didn't have friends was because you were mean. We didn't care that you were gay. You were mean. That's why people didn't like you. That's why people picked on you sometimes, because you were really awful to be around. But he's like grifter to the T, and ended up making an entire career, fame and fortune off of that. And it's not even true. I mean, him being gay is true, but his whole story of, oh, I was so picked on, nobody liked me, and it's all because I'm gay. That's so unbelievably not true. Maybe if you had been nice to people and you didn't tattle on them all the time and try to get people in trouble and gossip and turn people against each other, maybe then people would have liked you more. But I guess had he lived his life any differently, he would not have had the fame and fortune and virtue signaling, really, that he's able to do now this late in life. So anyway, subscribe to the channel, like this video, comment your thoughts down below. I'm Jasmine Lane, and I will talk to you tomorrow.